Hi, this is Pete Eckman with the RoboZone podcast. This is the recording for episode 165 and probably one of my favorite subjects. I say that about every episode, but I started my mentorship in first as a scouting mentor for 70 and 494 out of Goodrich, Michigan. So shout out to the Martians and more Martians. But today we're going to talk about scouting for Rapid React, something that was requested through Chief Delphi. And when Chief Delphi says, hey, we think you guys need to cover this, I reach out and say, get some volunteers. So here's my volunteers for today. Kim and John are running late, so we may get our GoPro corner update a little bit later, but we want to be cognizant because it is still build season and week 0 events are this Saturday. So let's get to some introductions. First, we got David Reeves. Dave, please introduce yourself.
Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm from Team 862 Lightning Robotics. I'm the student president this year. I'm also the human player and the tablet scouting, run man, you can call me. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Next up, we have the dynamic duo, a mentor and a student from what team, Justin?
3536 ElectroEagles.
And who are you, Justin? Please introduce yourself.
I am Justin Christenson. I'm the current scouting captain for Team 3536, and I also work on our scouting app on the Android tablets.
And our mentor from 3536 is Dennis. Dennis, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Dennis Burton. As Pete mentioned, I'm a programming mentor with Team 3536. Also working with the FTC teams and occasionally working with the Cop Sci program at the high school. So I just like to work with kids learning programming.
And we have some late additions. I'm just picking on John. We've got John and Kim from Kettering University. How you doing, John and Kim?
You go first.
We're good. We're sorry we're late. We
No
clicked
worries.
in for the Zoom meeting and then my computer turned off and we couldn't figure that out because it was plugged in.
You gotta love technology.
A little bit of fun and worry you a little bit and stuff like that, you know? Hey.
I will save the ridicule for John till I'm in person. And then I will give him some ridicule because he's an IT guy. There's no excuses, John.
Hey, we also got the camera set up and everything for this weekend up, so it's to see the whole field. So it ought to be cool.
Yes, and we'll talk about that. We're going to be cognizant of time. This is going to be a kind of a quicker episode. John and Kim, you guys are hosting Kettering Week 0 here in a couple days. You guys ready to go? Everything's set?
Hey, we're ready to rock. We'll get the trailer for Real Field tomorrow, Thursday. All the days are just going.
I know.
And melding together. We'll get to Real Field tomorrow. We'll put it up Friday night when the FTAs get here. And we took half of our field down today. We'll take the other half down tomorrow. We are ready to rock and roll.
I would do some air guitar, but I don't want to embarrass myself because people clip that and Dennis will not let that down. Trust me. I know Dennis. So let's talk about and thank you, John and Kim, for giving us an update about week 0 and what's going on with Kettering. We can't wait. We're going to stream it live on RoboZone. I'll be remotely controlling it. It'll be interesting for Saturday. But we wanted to talk about scouting, something that people, when they look at a robotics team and you say scouting, they give you, kind of a side eye, like, what are you talking about? I thought you guys build robots. But when it comes down to an event, it is, from my opinion, one of the most important things that a team can do, because if you don't know who you're picking in alliance selection, nor if you don't know who you're playing with or against in a regular match, how can you strategize properly? And strategy wins matches, matches wins blue banners, and blue banners makes us feel good. So that's basically it. So David, how does the scouting for the Lightning happen? I mean, how do you guys approach each season as they go by?
So every year, I guess we could have competition and pre-competition, but we do some pre-competition scouting on each of the robots that will be there. So we take a look at like every team that's going to be there. We see any of the resources that they released. One of our members even started looking at people's GitHubs to see, hey, what do these robots actually do? Which is kind of interesting. After we take a deep delve into that, during our competitions, we split our scouting into 3 divisions with pit scouting beforehand, paper scouting, which kind of delves into the qualitative of the robot. So like, what does it do? How is it good? And what are some things that we can observe, and that's done directly by our strategy team. And then finally, we have our tablet scouting, which is, I mean, arguably for me, being the tablet scouter developer, is probably one of our most important aspects, because we're getting all the quantitative data that backs all the data up that we've already been looking at.
Follow-up question. So you pit scout on paper and you tablet scout for matches?
Yep. So we pit scout and paper scout on paper, and then we tablet scout during matches as well.
Okay, so you're a hybrid. It's not just all tablet. It's not just all paper. It's kind of a mix between the two.
Yep.
Makes sense. So Justin, tell us a little bit about how the ElectroEagles are part of the LCRA. I got to mention it because, you know, we helped build it. So how does the ElectroEagles go about their scouting?
So in a similar process, of course, we haven't had to do this for a couple of years because of COVID, but what would normally would have happened was, especially for the later events, there would be some pre-competition scouting of the past tournaments. That's what I did 3 years ago. Obviously, haven't had the chance to do that again. And then once a competition actually hits, we have 1 or 2 people going around with tablets to pit scout. And then, of course, once the competition actually does start, we have a full 6 people scouting each robot on tablets again in the stands.
So you do both scouting, pit based and match based on the tablet itself, saving them. You guys got a fancy design. Maybe you guys send me a couple screenshots of the app and we'll put it in the show notes and stuff like that. And Dennis, you help mentor this group that with Justin being the lead of the scouting app, right?
Yep. Yeah, a couple of years ago, we ran into a scenario where we had a lot of kids that wanted to work on programming, and there just isn't enough that you can actually put on the robot. So we kind of split up. Justin's dad works with a team that works on a mini app or mini game that people can play in the stands, both, you know, which always ends up in both the Play Store and App Store. And we started working on developing a custom Android app for doing scouting. So gives some students the opportunity to work with building a custom mobile app, working on concepts like pulling from APIs like Blue Alliance and syncing data between multiple tablets and pushing that data up to Tableau so that they can do some analysis with it. Just like a really good experience for building out the resume for some of the students that chose to go that route.
So all good things. And I, as someone that hires IT people for the state of Michigan, all good things to have on your resume. I mean, amazing things that you can have on your resume when you start to look for coders and stuff like that. So thank you for giving us a little bit of insight on how you guys scout. Now let's talk about what we're going to scout, right? I wear multiple hats on my team. I help with the scouting lead too, just because he's new this year to it. We lost our head scouting lead thanks to whatever you want to call the last 2 years, a blur. We'll just call it a blur. So I'm training him on how to do it, and he's trying to wrap his mind around whether he wants to do a hybrid of paper and tablet, all tablet. There's some things out there that if you guys don't have the resources, we don't have the resources of Dennis and Justin. We do have them as partners and friends in the LCRA, and I'm sure they'll help us. But not every team has a robustness of extra coders to do a tablet or an app on a tablet, which is great that you guys do that and you promote it. And Dennis, you're mentoring the next level of coders out there. But let's talk about the game, right? This is one of my favorite games in a while. I think there are a lot of things that you need to account for when you scout for this game. So let's talk about pit scouting first. So David, what are some things that you're going to have your scouters pit scout? What are the most important questions that need to be answered as far as you're concerned in pit scouting?
So I think one of the things that we highlighted the most on our pit scouting kind of criteria was looking at how kind of dynamic they are on the field in terms of shooting. We want to make sure that if we're kind of paddling around the field, since it's a very open field, there's a lot of options to go around, that we're not completely restricting off one. So if we can understand where they actually are going on the field to shoot, or if they can go anywhere, that would be even more probably preferable than just staying in one spot. We want to kind of get all their aspects about their shooter to learn, kind of work with them during our matches. And that kind of also ties in with autonomous as well. We do not want to be running into other teams on an open field.
So let me break it down a little bit more. Okay. What are the actual questions that you're going to ask? You're going to have your pit scouters when they go on at your first event. I think you said week 2. What are they going to ask these other teams?
So in terms of autonomous, we look kind of specifically, obviously at the tarmac, that's kind of one of the easiest ones. We ask them the number of balls they scored. So kind of, because we've heard about these infamous like 4-ball autons. I don't know if they
Don't say infamous. It's out there. There's
Yeah, well,
video. There's
yeah.
video.
I'm a bit skeptical about the working in competitions, but anyway, like we asked them how many they scored. We asked them to draw their routes, and we asked them if they have multiple pathings because we want to be able to make sure they're compatible. In terms of the shooter scoring, we obviously asked them where they score, and then we also asked them kind of their method of scoring the balls. So we have stuff for like if you have dynamic, manual, or vision, or you just dump it into the logo. So we want to make sure we understand that. We obviously ask where can you score on the field. So if it has to be on the launch pad or it just has to be right next to the fender. And then we ask a couple more questions on the rest of the robot, but those are the kind of the main bases for shooting.
Okay. Justin, what do you guys, how did you guys break down the pit scouting? What are the questions you're asking these teams and the people that are in the pit about the robots?
So we took a more general approach, not really getting that specific, because obviously we all know that pit scout data is not exactly the most accurate. So what we get into is for autonomous specifically, all we ask is if they perform autonomous, and if they don't, would they like help creating one? And we do that just in case they want help, so they might look on us more favorably later, and it also helps for like chairman and other such awards like that. For teleop, again, we go pretty generally. We just say like we ask if their robot can shoot. If it does, how many shots can they make out of 10? Just to get a general sense of the accuracy, along with what goal they like shooting, whether it's high or low. And finally, for that, we also ask if they play defense. So if they do, that's a good indicator for us for later in alliance selections if we do need a defense bot. And then for endgame, we just ask how long it takes to hang, because I think that's one of the very important metrics we need for the endgame scenario with the hang. And obviously we have the hanging preference where they decide to hang. So traversal, high, or no, sorry, where they hang, like location wise, like left, right, or center. So we can plan if we want to double hang. And then we have a question about how many inches the robot swings side to side, as just to get like a general idea. And then we also ask about their team. So we have how many seasons the drivers have been in, just to get a general idea of how well the drive team actually will perform, along with specifically seasons the operator has been in, and how accurate the human player is at making shots for the decision on which human player should be the one shooting the balls during autonomous. And we also have a photos tab, which is just to take pictures of the robot for game scouting. So as Mr. Burton showed before this started, on the game scouting tab, there are pictures of like the robots just before you can start scouting. I think that's important so it makes the scouters have a little bit easier time trying to find the robot.
So Dennis, I both of these students did very good jobs of what they're gonna, pit scout with. Now, the pointed question I have for you, because you're a mentor, right? And something that Justin or David said something about, pit scouting is only as good as someone that's giving you the answers.
Right.
I'm going to use the what would Woody do kind of Woody Flowers thing. What would Woody do? He would be honest. And I think people need to be honest. And I think that's a rarity in today's society. With FRC, everyone wants the robot to be the best. We all know that.
I don't think that has to be a devious thing, right? I mean, you have, all of us have been involved with these programs, and there are different levels of engagement with the students that are, sometimes hanging around the pits, and they may give the best answer that they know that just might not be accurate.
Sure. But for anyone that's going to watch this or listen to this, or if there's a mentor out there, if they can talk to their teams and say, listen, be as honest as possible, because one of the things I think people don't realize is that this information we use, like me as a drive coach, I use every piece of information that I'm provided. So if it's inaccurate, it looks bad, not on my scouters, because they're only writing what they're told. But again, I think the days of secrecy as far as what you can do shouldn't be there, like the Open Alliance, part of the Open Alliance, my team is. It's a great concept. There's no smoke and mirrors. It's all good. It's all about, kids learning and not winning stuff. So I think that the students, whoever's in the pits, at least whoever's in the pits, that's going to be asked the question should be well informed or say, and this is a life lesson, I don't know, let me ask my mentor. Because I think that's just leads to stuff when we're adults and when you go out to the workforce. If you don't know something, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll get you the answer. It's always that second part always gets more respect. I don't know, but I'll get you the answer. So I think that's something I think you and me, Dennis, as mentors can agree upon. I hope that we want our students to give the best answers as possible, because especially in like a week 1 event, how do you know how well you do? Because we'll see all these release videos, and we've seen a couple of them, and everything's perfect. Every ball goes in, none bounce out. Everything, it's perfect. Every climb is perfect, but that's not reality. So we want to make sure, at least in the scouting.
Okay.
Do you agree, Dennis?
Absolutely. But
Okay.
before we step away from pit scouting, I just want to mention like building up some resources like this, getting filtered out here. Basically a whiteboard that has the field on it.
Yeah.
So that you can have that discussion and draw those paths as David was mentioning. I haven't figured out a way to integrate that in a tablet. We're running some low cost tablets, so the drawing tools on that are pretty weak. So right now the old school just whiteboard, be able to draw it up, have one for pit scouting, have another one for the strategy team. So as they're interoperating with other teams, they can have that same discussion, 4 or 5 matches in, as things may have changed and differed from the state of things when pit scouting was done. So I know we change our autonomous on the fly if we're seeing patterns develop throughout the game.
That's true. So that's a perfect segue, Dennis, into tablet scouting or match scouting, right? I'm just going to use match scouting, whether it's paper based, because some teams do paper, some teams do it tablet. David, what's the most important things that we want to account for when we talk about match scouting? Out there on the field, 6 robots trying to do their thing. What's the important things that we need to account for? Metrics.
So I think obviously there's a lot of data that we can just get raw looking at the game that, most people can get just looking at Blue Alliance. But I think one of the things that especially our team does in specifically paper scouting is that we want to try to get to know the team like a friend, or like just to try to get to know everything about their robot, how it interacts in other situations. If we can determine that the drivetrain team probably doesn't know the rules if they're trying to block shots by extending upwards, then we're probably going to start getting to know a little bit more about them. Even if they shoot like cargo consistently well and really fast, we probably don't want a team that breaks the rules. So our team in specific just has kind of note sections where we get to know each thing. And then each paper scouter is actually dedicated to teams. So we're not going to be switching around. So when we get into our final scouting circle determined for pick list, each person is just able to state out facts and kind of their interpretations of the team as they got to know them over the 10 to 12 matches.
How many scouters do you have, David?
Previous years we've had about 8 to 10 per competition for just strategy alone without tablet scouting. This year might look a little different. We're planning on busing a couple or fewer students to the competitions. So we're looking at about 6 maybe. So that might have to change a little bit. But we're still kind of hopeful in the fact that we'll be able to keep that personal relationship with each of the teams that we're scouting.
So I think one of the good things that first does is we broadcast every match, right? So you could scout from a remote facility if you needed to. Those bigger teams, there's teams that have hundreds of kids. I still can't fathom that, because I just try to keep the herding the cats of the 11 students I have on my team, just make sure they're gainfully employed. So from what I got, what you're saying is you're watching the behavior of the team, not necessarily the robot itself, but the actual makeup of the team, the drive team, what they can do, that type of thing. Am I right?
Pretty much. We still
Okay.
watch like the robot in general and kind of see those interactions between the drive team and robot. Like we still want to get that data, I
Mhm.
just think we put a lot more emphasis than normal on the actual drive team of the side as
Okay,
we interact with them so much.
makes sense. So Justin, what are you guys focused on for the teleop or the match scouting in general? The autonomous, the teleop, the climb at the end.
So for that, we take a more like just sole quantitative approach, really. So we're mainly looking at how much they score, how many balls they score. If we might at some point add accuracy, but it's not there yet. We look at how much they score, how and all of those like quantitative measurements and where they hang. And though there's not a page yet, but we're in the process of adding a team summary page. And on that page, we might have, I haven't looked at it yet, but there could be spaces for notes where we could put in what we noticed about penalties or what we noticed about their design and what worked well, what didn't. So using that, I guess that would be our equivalent to looking how the drive team competes, I guess. But mainly we're just looking at quantitative data that we can easily look at and decide based off that.
So two entirely different approaches, but I can see the value of both of them. Knowing what I think there's could be a mix of both sometimes that people do. I at least that's what our team's going to do, is a mixture of watching what they can do, making sure that what they said they could do to validate that. And then, getting the metrics of who's the best shooter in the top, who's the ones that's shooting the bottom, which I think, just based upon all the robots I've seen so far, people are missing that the low goal is a thing. I just don't understand it. I hope it works to our advantage because that's what we're focused on for week one. But everything I've seen is in the top, and sometimes the balls come out. So, Dennis, what else can you tell us about how the ElectroEagles are handling the match scouting?
So I think one of the valuable things you hear out of the different approaches is understanding the constraints of your team. You have 11 students. We have around 40. Lightning in the past has had more than you can count. So, we each have different constraints when we're at events. By the time you pull your drive team out, you're not able to necessarily look at all the robots at the same time without, say, some parent support and stuff like that. I know we run our scheduling so that everybody that's not drive team or pit team, they do some time doing some scouting. So we typically put up a schedule from, say a block of 5 matches at a time. So students can choose who they want to sit with in the scouting locations and work through those 5 matches. But that means you are going to get different levels of engagement. You're not going to have somebody whose sole focus the whole season has been scouting and they're really engaged with the way, the teams work. So the data that we collect is the stuff that's relatively easy to collect and doesn't require a lot of interpretation. So that we leave like Justin, and we'll have one more. We have a freshman that will be following him around. They will be pulled out of the scouting to look for that quantitative or qualitative analysis, where they're just watching the game and not capturing stats and taking notes on the teams and the things that they see. Whereas the other students during their scheduled slots are basically capturing the stats. So when they get ready to make decisions, they have their own observations combined with the data that's being fed to them.
So, David, do you think this game's going to be easy to scout? Or do you think it's going to be a little harder?
If you're talking comparatively to, like, let's just say Infinite Recharge,
Let's use that as the base.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's a bit harder to scout for kind of Justin and Dennis's standpoint of, well, I guess qualitative for Justin, but quantitative kind of for Dennis on that side. The amount of stuff that's going on at the field that's all centralized in the center, right? You're going to have max of 6 robots all shooting cargo into the upper hub. Sometimes if you don't have 2 or 3 students manning a quantitative like point, you're going to lose a bit of data, I think. Infinite Recharge, obviously that could have been the case as well, as we're shooting these power cells really fast, but I still think this might be a little bit more difficult, as it's not, it's also not as like what some people might call entertaining to watch, as robots pick up cargo, drive to center, shoot it slowly. So it just might be a little more unbearable to watch for some students, I think.
What about the sight lines? I mean, the sight lines in this one, I'll use an example you just provided. Infinite Recharge, you're picking up, you're going to one end, or if you were lucky, you were one of those top tier teams, you could shoot it all the way down, but at least you could see who's shooting. With the hub, and you're going in a 360 degree, if you're on one side of the field as a scouter and your robot that you're scouting goes behind, how do you know if that shot was that guy, right? So some of that qualitative versus quantitative might be, a little sketchy sometimes.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot going on. So
yeah, you're gonna have a lot of data loss behind the not hangar, I'm sorry, behind the hub where you're looking.
Mhm.
And also at the hangar, when climbs start to come, you have a robot that comes up right against the edge of the field. You're not able to see really anything past that.
I think there's some fuzzy spots too. If you're comparing to Infinite Recharge, we were tracking the high balls and the high center balls. But in reality, when you're watching the game, it's almost impossible to see the ones that are going back through the back. So we had that in the data, but it was not necessarily good data. So by the end of the season, we ended up just kind of combining scores that came in on those, as they were just kind of high balls, because the accuracy of data is probably not great. This year, I think the thing that's going to require, whether you're doing it tablet scouting or paper scouting, you've got to be able to adjust for, I counted this as a shot, and then it bounced out. So you've got to be able to adjust on the fly pretty quickly.
Dustin, you have anything to add as far as the difficulty in this year's scouting is going to happen?
I mean, I feel like personally it'd be slightly easier than Infinite Recharge, just because we went to a couple off-season tournaments, and I can't tell you how many times all three robots would line up and just launch everything they had into their rocket, and you would
Folly.
not be able to tell
Mhm.
who made what, who missed what. So I think just from that standpoint, and the lower amount of balls in the game this year, it'll be a bit easier to tell, as at least if they made it or not. Whether how many balls, well, I mean, they can shoot two, but whether or not they made it, even if they go around the backside, I think you'll still be able to tell. Oh, I know they went back. I saw two balls coming from that side, so I think it's safe to say two were made. So I just think generally it's gonna be slightly easier than Infinite Recharge.
So we're already half an hour into this. That's how much fun these things can be. And we can talk scouting all day, but we have robots to build and finish and get ready for week 0. And I can see John sitting there trying to stay awake and wiping the sweat off his brow at the same time, because he's that involved with week 0. So I have one more question for each one of you, and I'll just ask it. And then when you give me your answer, then just go into who you are and how we can follow your team. We're going to start with you, David. So my last question for you is, what do you think the max score for an alliance is going to be in week 1? Go.
Max score from a week 1 alliance, I would, from watching week 0 in New Hampshire, I would give it around a 60, because this is not going to be as good as a kind of centralization of teams this year.
Okay. And David, who are you and how can we follow your team?
I'm David Reeves from Lightning Robotics, student president, human player, tablet scouter. And then you can follow our team on YouTube, Instagram, and our website, lightningrobotics.com.
You're next up, Justin. What's the max score for an alliance in week 1?
I think, I mean, depending on the event, obviously, I think it'll be between 50 and 70. Maybe I'd say 55, honestly, somewhere around there. Again, depending on the event and the teams that are there.
And
you can
go ahead.
I was just gonna finish up saying you can follow us at heartlandrobotics.org, I believe. I'm not entirely clear what our socials are.
And who are you, Justin? Again?
I'm Justin Christenson. I'm the scouting captain for team 3536.
Dennis, you're bringing up the rear. Tell us the max score for a week 1 alliance.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Justin. I think they're going to be just a touch over 50. I think we'll see a couple of robots at each location that are able to do that final climb. I think that this particular climb is a bit more challenging than ones in years past. So I think it's going to be a lower number than we may have seen in the past. But yeah, I think if you're just looking for highest and not median, I think you're going to be up there in the 50s.
Wow, those are interesting numbers, because if theoretically, if you get two robots on the traversal, that's 30 in itself. So you guys are all saying it's going to be a low scoring game.
Those balls bounce out a lot.
A lot. And variation, inflation variation. And we're not talking about the economy. We're talking about the balls in the field. I knew I'd get John laughing with that one. I knew it. I got Kim too. So thank all three of you for coming on board with us tonight. John and Kim, is there anything else that we need to promote or just say before we close out for today?
Yeah, if you have a senior on your team that has applied and been admitted to Kettering, please remind them that the robotics scholarship deadline is March 1st. We are hoping to be able to announce from the fields at different locations across Michigan and in some other states, some of those scholarship winners, hopefully by week 2.
It's always good to see too.
Yeah, and that's important for the kids and everything.
Mhm.
And it's a good time if we can get that information to them as soon as possible. But we are really psyched here because we got week 0 coming up. We got week 1, Kettering week 1 and Kettering week 2. And if there's any sleep in there, we'll see. But, caffeine is really, nectar of the gods. But we are so excited to have this going on here and get back to what it really means to have an event. And it looks like everything's moving that way. So let's rock. And don't forget, like Pete said, we are streaming week 0. So if you can't make it, you can watch it. And where do they watch it, Pete?
Let's see. We broadcast to Twitch. We stream to YouTube. And now we're streaming Facebook too, all at the same time. So people have multiple ways to watch us on
A great
Saturday.
time to test out your scouting processes, do your predictions on what would happen based on that data for your final events, and do some validation.
Oh yeah, true story. Get it out now before week 1 happens.
Practice.
That's right. We will check in with you, John and Kim, about what happened at week 0 for Kettering next week on Wednesday.
Let's
For
hope
those
we're
of-
not picking up parts, you know?
Yes. Keep caffeinated, John. Keep caffeinated. Everyone that came on board tonight, good luck this Rapid React season, and we'll check in with you during the season, okay?
Thanks, Pete.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.